They never screamed his name. Not in pubs, not on scarves, not even when he came back to save them. But some men lead without noise. Some carry weight without asking to. And Terry Neill was one of them. He didn't chase roles. He didn't ask for praise. He just stood there, solid, still, and always the first to take the hit. He held the back line when others hid. He spoke when no one else would. And when the club began to unravel, he returned. Not as a player, but as the one they trusted to clean up the mess. He didn't roar. He didn't point. He just steadied the ship twice. Terry Neill was never a slogan, never a headline, but he was there when it counted most. Subscribe if you believe football should honor the ones who carried the weight and never asked for a banner. William John Terence Neill was born on 8th May 1942 in the working streets of Belfast, Northern Ireland. Not into privilege, not into legacy, into rain, into dirt pitches and cracked leather. Into a world where football wasn't a game, it was an escape. He began at Bangor FC, a local club where mistakes were punished and reputations earned in cold air and closed mouths. He played like someone who had something to prove, but no interest in proving it loudly. In December 1959, Arsenal brought him across the water. No banners, no press. Just a quiet handshake and a seat on the train. He made his first team debut on 23rd December 1960, barely 18 years old. Surrounded by older voices, but already reading the game like he'd lived it twice. By the time most players were waiting for instructions, he was giving them. By 1962, he was starting regularly. And then, something unthinkable. They gave him the captain's armband. At 20 years old, he became the youngest captain in Arsenal's history. That record still stands. He played with control, with cold shoulders and sharp timing. Sometimes in midfield, sometimes deeper, but always in the middle of everything. He served under Billy Wright, then Bertie Mee, and through 10 long years, he became the quiet spine of a club still chasing itself. He made over 270 appearances, never chased the spotlight, and never let the badge feel light on his chest. But not all stories rise. In 1968, something shifted. Jaundice, real, physical, the kind that turns strength into stillness. He missed matches, lost sharpness, fell out of rhythm, and when the club moved on, he didn't make them feel guilty for it. He left in 1970. Just before the side he helped build won the double. No medals, no final parade, just a clean exit, like every tackle he ever made. He left Arsenal without noise, no curtain call, no medal in his hand. Just a quiet move and a new weight to carry. In the summer of 1970, he signed for Hull City, but not just as a player-manager, one of the youngest in the league, and one of the few still willing to fight on two fronts. He took the job seriously. No grand speeches, no big signings, just hard training, sharp setups, and a dressing room that began to respect him more in a suit than they ever did in boots. Between the lines, he kept playing. Between the sessions, he started coaching, demanding more, conceding less, building a club that began to feel stable again. Over 3 full seasons, he made over 100 appearances, held the midfield together, and kept the side afloat in England's toughest second tier. But that wasn't all. In 1971, while still working full-time at Hull, he was asked to manage Northern Ireland. His country, his roots, his responsibility. He didn't say no. He never did. From 1971 to 1974, he lived 2 football lives. Club manager, national manager, still young, still learning, still listening. He didn't make headlines, didn't win titles, didn't ask for attention, but those years forged something stronger than silverware. It gave him the voice, the vision, the fire, the calm. And in 1974, a bigger door creaked open. One he never thought he'd walk through. And one the fans never expected to see him behind. They said he was too young, too polite, too soft-spoken to lead men in white. But in September 1974, at just 32 years old, Terry Neill became manager of Tottenham Hotspur, Arsenal's former captain, now in charge at White Hart Lane. The press called it betrayal. The fans called it strange. But Terry? He just called it another job to do well. Spurs were struggling. The swagger of the 60s was fading, and the shadow of relegation crept near. Neill didn't arrive with a magic wand. He arrived with tactics, temperament, and time. He steadied the ship, avoided the drop in his first season, and began building a side that could fight again. He signed clever, spoke calmly, and never once took the bait from the tabloids. But he wasn't sentimental either. He made bold decisions. Let go of aging icons, demanded fitness, focus, and respect. He didn't win trophies, not yet, but he won something rarer in those days: professional respect across the aisle. By 1976, Spurs had found their balance. They weren't flying, but they were no longer falling. And somewhere down the road, Highbury was watching, because the boy who once captained Arsenal and now proved himself at Tottenham was becoming hard to ignore. He was just 34 when Arsenal called him back, but not to lace up his boots. This time it was the manager's chair they offered him. And he took it, the youngest manager in Arsenal's history. Some thought it was nostalgia, a feel-good story. But Terry Neill didn't return for sentiment. He came to win. The club was fading, stadium quiet, trophies a memory, not a goal. He walked through Highbury's marble halls not as a boy, but as a boss. He brought authority, clarity, and just the right edge of steel. He signed Malcolm MacDonald, backed the rise of Liam Brady. Rebuilt the midfield, the mindset, the mission. And behind closed doors, he was building something else too. The quiet revolution Arsenal had been waiting for. No headlines, no ego, just belief. And the fans, they started to believe too. Because Terry wasn't just managing a squad. He was commanding a memory, turning the club he once served into the club he now led. And this time, he wasn't wearing number 5. He was wearing the weight of the whole institution. But he never blinked. By 1978, Arsenal wasn't drifting anymore. They were marching to Wembley. Under Terry Neill, the club reached heights not seen since the Double Days. And he did it his way, with youth, grit, and a mind built for pressure. 1978 FA Cup Final, Arsenal vs Ipswich. A game they were expected to win. But it wasn't to be. Ipswich shocked them, and Neill walked away wounded, but not broken. Because a year later, they came back. 1979 FA Cup Final. This time it was Manchester United. Arsenal led 2-0. Then United clawed it back to 2-2 in the dying minutes. Wembley was spinning, but in the final breath, Alan Sunderland slid in the winner. 3-2. Neill didn't shout, he just clenched his fists. He'd done what few thought he could. Won silverware for Arsenal. And then came 1980, perhaps the hardest to bear. FA Cup Final again. This time, West Ham, a shock loss. Then, 4 days later, the Cup Winners' Cup Final in Brussels. Valencia, a 0-0 draw, lost on penalties. No shame, but no trophy either. 3 finals in 3 years, 1 title, 2 heartbreaks. But to the players, Terry Neill was the man who brought Arsenal back to the big stage. To the fans, he was the steady hand that reminded them what belief looked like. To the club, he was the captain who came home and made them matter again. There's a silence in football that only managers understand. It comes after the noise, after the cheers fade and the boardroom doors close behind you. For Terry Neill, that silence arrived in December 1983. The man who brought Arsenal back to Wembley 3 years in a row was suddenly out of a job. The results had slipped. The magic felt tired. The board, once grateful, now looked to the future. 1 month before his 42nd birthday, Terry Neill was sacked. It hurt. Not just because of the job, but because it was his club. He had captained it. He had brought it to glory. He had given everything. And now, he left through the back door with headlines colder than he deserved. There were no banners, no thank you displays, just a press release, and the hum of a world that moved on too fast. But the ones who knew him, the players he backed, the fans who remembered, they never forgot. Because football forgets fast. But the real ones feel the absence longer than the applause. He stepped away quietly. No autobiography tour, no desperate calls to lower league benches, no attempt to claw back the spotlight. Terry Neill simply stepped back. He still loved the game. He still walked past Highbury's brick walls with memories in his chest. But he knew his time in the dugout had passed. Instead, he found a new rhythm. He ran a sports bar near London's Pall Mall, a place where fans, ex-players, and quiet legends would gather. He won 59 caps for Northern Ireland between 1961 and 1973, captaining his country in later years. He passed on 28 July 2022, aged 80. No celebratory glare, just the quiet of a name said one last time. By his side was Sandra, his wife since 1969, silent strength beside his storm. 2 daughters, Tara and Abigail, voices he'd protected from the noise. 4 grandchildren, Isaac, Zeb, Azania, Florence, the next blood, the quiet echo of his life. He left behind more than matches, more than finals, more than highs and lows. He left a family, a home, a legacy gentle enough to carry. And yet, something was still unfulfilled. He had been promised a testimonial once, back in Arsenal's old offices in the 1960s, a match, a moment, a thank you. But illness struck. The promise dissolved. The match never came. No lap of honor, no applause for the one who led from silence, not for the youngest captain, not for the manager who steered them to Europe, not for the man who carried the badge in 2 eras. He didn't ask for gratitude, but he deserved it. They called him a gentleman. Unshakable, quiet, proud, loyal. His teammates spoke softly. Pat Jennings, a gentleman of football. Jerry Armstrong. He told great stories, always helping others. Liam Brady. I never doubted Terry's love for the club. When the game had ended, they released the news. But those who knew, those who watched him stand when others fell, felt the space he left behind. His name still asks us to echo it, not as legend because of trophies, but because of what he carried in absence, silence, and stillness. Terry Neill was never loud, but he never left. And that is the legacy we must give him. Subscribe if you believe football should honor those who gave everything, the captains, the quiet ones, the names they nearly forgot,